Shortly after getting married, I decided in my infinite wisdom that being married sucked. And so I started seeking out sexual gratification outside of my marriage with other women. That didn't work very well.
So often we are stumbling over ourselves trying to be kind and trying to be nice, and we're not being honest. We're not actually addressing the thing that needs desperately to be addressed.
I called a buddy of mine, a pastor friend of mine. I said, "Hey man, I need help." He had a similar story, and I told him what happened, and he smiled, kind of grinned on the phone with me, and he said, "Wow, great, welcome. Your life is about to actually begin."
The great wonder of salvation is that his power, the power that raised him from the dead, also breaks the power of sin in our own lives. It has the capacity to do that.
I think what it really was me running away from, I don't know how to be intimate. I don't know how to be vulnerable. I don't know how to love or be loved. And that's what had to be broken down for the heart change to actually happen.
We can't build anything that's deep and real and meaningful on a house of cards.
Porn and sex addiction is not a porn and sex problem. It's a how you deal with life problem. It's not the action that we take. It's where is our heart in it. And Jesus wants our heart. God wants our heart to be aligned with Him.
There's plenty of churches that are languishing because so many people are wrestling in this area of their sexuality, of their identity, and of their broken relationships. And it's all leaking out in their marriages and their relationships with their kids, etc.
You can't help the first look, but you can help the second.
Ultimately, these ridiculous arguments of justifications for all kinds of different sins, whether that's taking the life of the unborn or all these things, they wind up falling in on themselves. If you can just ask the questions and have the questions be something that somebody engages with.
There's still so much I haven't figured out that I'm having to unlearn and relearn, right? But it's that humble posture, I think, that is required in transformation to say, okay, there's something bigger than me here that's driving the story.
Welcome to the Love and Truth Network podcast, your guide for hope and healing in a hurting world searching for truth. Here we explore God's extraordinary design for biblical sexuality, identity, and authentic community. You'll be impacted by incredible stories of transformation, practical wisdom from pastors and counselors, and the power of God's grace that changes lives.
Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Love and Truth Network podcast. We're so glad that you're here and glad that you've tuned in. If you've been following us for a while, you know that we like to start off with our guests in sharing their story. And then really we're just engaging in some organic, kind of relaxed sort of Q&A and discussion about the culture and about the church, especially about the church, where the church, honestly, God's given the church the answers. And so often you hear me say all the time that the church is kind of the last organization on the planet that's really dealing with sexuality, but yet God is the one who's the author of sex, who's the author of our identity. And the church needs to be talking a lot more about and also living out the goodness of what it means to be men and women made in the image of God. Also what it means to have self-control, which is a fruit of the Spirit we know in Galatians. And so I'm really excited to introduce you to someone I've known for a couple of years now. His name is Austin. He's going to introduce himself and kind of share his background a little bit, but he has a TikTok that he does and puts out on TikTok this question of, is porn cheating? And kind of go from there. And that generates, you can imagine, a whole lot of dialogue, kind of the Charlie Kirk version in a sense, a little bit of that question, maybe Steven Crowder or whatever, but digitally basically, and gets a lot of dialogue, a lot of questions, and really great stuff that percolates up from that. So Austin, you can go ahead and correct everything I've just said that may be off, but I would love for you just to share a little bit of your background. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks for having me. Just to address the TikTok thing and the questions, is porn cheating? Or sometimes I frame it up as porn is cheating, change my mind, which is more the Steven Crowder flavor of that. My story, which I'll share in just a minute, has kind of gotten me to that point of I am passionate about creating conversations around the topic of sex, sexuality, sexual addiction, which of course all have a spiritual undertone to it, even though my content may not have a faith-based flavor when you first see it. It's kind of like you're just getting hit in the face by this conversation.
Yeah.
But really what drives what I do is the faith component of how Jesus saved my life, and I believe offers hope for everybody in this world. So you want me to just kind of dive in, share how I got there to ask these questions?
I'd love you. It was a cold day and whatever, and when you were born or whatever. Let's move forward from there a little bit, but start from the beginning.
Yeah, sounds good. So I kind of jumped to D-Day or Discovery Day, as we call it, and then I'll go back to what led up to
Sounds good.
D-Day. Yep. I'm 40 years old, born in 1985, and I got married when I was 26 years old. And shortly after getting married, I decided in my infinite wisdom that being married sucked. I didn't like it. I was not happy in the marriage, and sex was an issue. And so I started seeking out sexual gratification outside of my marriage with other women. That didn't work very well. I wouldn't recommend it as a strategy for anybody who's not happy in marriage. My wife and I early on oftentimes are like, we might need help. We might need to get some sort of help, but we never did it. And ask me why, I don't know. Maybe because I'll take the responsibility, was young and dumb, right? And just for the record, we're still married to the same woman. We've been married about 14 and a half years now. So praise God for that. Don't ask me how that happened, but here we are. So about a year into our marriage, I started acting out, and the acting out happened for about a year. And then I realized this wasn't good for me or my wife or my marriage, and so I stopped doing that. And I decided I was going to keep it in and take that secret to the grave. That didn't work very well either, because the wages of sin is death. And I was living a spiritually dead life. I might as well have just been a dead person walking around. And so after trying to keep in that secret for 4 years, I just couldn't do it anymore. My wife never knew that I struggled with pornography, never knew that I had been unfaithful to her. And finally, I came to her after we were in a marriage workshop, kind of just like your typical church workshop. Hey, you want to improve your marriage? I'm like, yeah, our marriage is fine. Maybe we can learn a couple tools. And through the course of that workshop, I was convicted. The Holy Spirit convicted me, not just to tell the truth to my wife, though that was vitally important, but Austin, you're doing it wrong. Doing what wrong? Okay, well, doing life wrong. I was living selfishly only for myself. I wanted to just feel good in the moment, no matter how I could do that. Now, obviously, that had massive implications with my wife and what further transpired in our marriage. But this
Can
was
I
not
just pause you there for a
Yeah.
second, because I want to. So was this a church marriage summit, or
Yeah,
what?
it was
Was it?
a faith-based marriage, like couples intensive, I would say, like a weekend workshop. Yeah.
Okay. And it was, so did I mean, when did you? I just think it's fascinating, and I think it's so important for us just to again realize that sometimes for those that are struggling, sometimes we feel like, why would I bother going to something like that? My life is such a disaster. We're way too far gone in our marriage, or I'm too far gone, even as a single individual. I'm too far gone to even go to something like that. That's not going to help me at all. And so I just want to highlight the fact that this was incredibly impactful. But then also, what was the do you have a remembrance of when you began to kind of crack open during that weekend? Like, what was it that started to shift you from, sure, whatever, I'll go, to, oh my gosh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get there in a second. I think my new orientation to life, this is again 8 years since that happened. Yeah, I call it humility, but it's like, I believe that I should be able to learn something essentially no matter what the environment is that I'm in, right?
Yeah.
For me to be like, oh, I've got all this figured out is foolish, I think. I may be a few steps ahead of some people in some areas and a few steps behind other people in other areas. No problem. That's why we all need each other, right? Now, that wasn't the orientation that got me to that workshop. I think it was more out of, I should be doing this, right? I grew up, quote unquote, Christian. I say that because as I reflect back on it, my opinion, I was 0% saved. I just was walking, thinking I was doing the things that would have indicated that. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to this workshop. I'll check the box. Deep down inside, I know my marriage is a disaster, but I'll show up and, then all the other couples we're with, they can see that I'm trying to do things that would continue to make my outward image look good, right? I had a high-paying sales job at the time, had the car I wanted, the house I wanted, all the things. And I was like, yeah, look at me. I'm so amazing, right? I wanted to further that. And I'll tell you the precise moment when the genuine heart shift happened. The first night of this workshop, sitting there next to my wife, who, by the way, was 8 months pregnant with our second child, our daughter. And the facilitator was kind of just, walking through some just opening themes that we would experience throughout the weekend. And I made some sort of foolish, naive comment about what would happen in my marriage if I were to die versus if my wife were to die. I don't remember how we got to talking about that, but I made the comment of like, if I were to die, my wife would be a disaster. Like, she would not know how to continue living in this world because I'm so great, right? She were to lose me, she would never recover, essentially. Whereas if she would die, I was like, I'd be fine. Like, I'd probably be sad for 6 months or so, but then I'd get back on my feet and I'd be fine. Now, here's the key. The facilitator said, interesting. Did you have any trauma? Did you have any trauma in your life growing up? And I got firm and I was like, yes. One word answer, yes. She's like, okay, well, what was it? I'm like, okay, well, my mom died when I was 5 in a plane crash, but it hasn't affected me. And I had this tone, and you're laughing. We can all laugh now, right?
I mean, I'm heartbroken for the 5-year-old.
It's an appropriate laugh. It's an appropriate laugh, right? It's like, so I said, my mom died when I was 5 in a plane crash, but it hasn't affected me. And I was so serious with her, trying to be like, shut up, stop prying into this, right? And this is the phrase or the response that changed my life. She said, interesting. Would you be open to considering through the course of this weekend that has actually impacted your life in more ways than you're willing to recognize right now? And that just humbled me right then. I get emotional even saying it right now. It's like, I was like, you got me. I was like, okay, fine. I will consider that over the course of this weekend. And so she was the first person who I experienced. I'm sure other people tried to in my life, but she's the first person who was like essentially calling my BS. Like, no, there's more there. There's got to be
like
more.
Nathan with David, right? In a sense.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Like you were ambushed by the simplest question.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm a big fan of all the healing professions, therapy, coaching, counseling, seminars and all that. This woman was a flight attendant who did this on the side.
Yep.
Great. She saved my life, right? So over the course of that weekend, I decided that I was going to, one, actually receive the Holy Spirit, receive Jesus into my life, and two, confess what I had been holding on to my wife after this weekend workshop. Because I, in my wisdom, I was like, I can't reveal this right now in a room full of 40 of our friends. But Monday morning, as soon as we got back to reality, I called a buddy of mine, a pastor friend of mine. I said, hey man, I need help. He had a similar story. And I told him what happened, and he smiled, kind of grinned on the phone with me. And he said, wow, great. Welcome. Your life is about to actually begin. And so then that began the, kind of the unwinding of my life to figure out, how did I get to that point of being so lonely, isolated, desperate, depressed in my life and my marriage, to where using other women and pornography was the best idea that I had.
Yeah.
Porn and sex addiction is not a porn and sex problem. It's a how you deal with life problem. And so this was my invitation to say, oh gosh, I gotta look at all of this. So I can go on from there. But,
yes, and I'd love you to pick up in just a moment. The other thing I'm wondering about is, as a reminder, I think you said it, but as a reminder, how far into your marriage were you? How much long after getting married did you begin hooking up sexually with other women?
Yeah, the physically acting out probably happened about a year into our marriage, and lasted for about a year. So those first 2 years was kind of the lowest point. And then I held it in for about 4 years and confessed at about the 6-year mark of our marriage.
And did that wind up shifting from acting out over the course of that 1 year? Did that shift into pornography, or had pornography ever been an issue?
Yeah, good question. So again, this is where you got to look at the whole story of my life, right? So 5 years old, I lose my mom in a plane crash. She was a pilot. This was July, I believe she died July 12th of 1990. And I started kindergarten about 30 days later. All right. So the feelings of shame, which as Brene Brown puts it, is essentially the overwhelming feeling like we're not worthy of love.
Yes.
Right. So I as I unpack my story, it's like that 5-year-old boy had to go pretend to be okay in kindergarten. And the reality is, it's just my experience, but like nobody really knows how to deal with death, period.
No.
Especially in that situation when a young child loses a parent. It's like there's no script for that. And so this is where I believe I kind of developed this strategy of don't talk about what's going on in my heart because nobody can
Yep.
handle it. Okay. So what does that have to do with porn? Everything. Because then I found porn or porn found me when I was about 10, 11, 12 years old in my room, had a computer in my room by myself. This is the mid 90s. We didn't really know, how bad pornography was and how ubiquitous it would become. And so when I found porn or porn found me, it gave me everything I wanted. Oh, well, this feels so good, right? It's a way to escape. I'm getting love, affection, care, connection. It's all false, right? From a woman who's actually pursuing me and nurturing me, which is something that I desperately wanted in my life. And that stopped when my mom died. So the pornography use started, in those early teenage years, 10, 11, 12 years old. And that was persistent for the next 20 years or so. It wasn't really a huge problem. When I say huge problem, meaning the frequency still a problem, but it's not like my frequency was through the roof in that first year of my marriage and when we were engaged. It was certainly there. But that desperation for trying to fill this void in my heart, it just went straight to, okay, I'm going to go act out with other women because that'll make everything feel better. But I think what it really was me running away from, I don't know how to be intimate. I don't know how to be vulnerable. I don't know how to love or be loved. And that's what had to be broken down for the heart change to actually happen.
Yep. Well, and that whole thing is so fascinating to me, just from a psychological perspective and developmental, obviously, through the various stages of childhood development. It's like you had your mom for the first very critical 0 to 2, 0 to 3 kind of stage, and then she's gone. And I mean, I just can't even imagine what on earth that felt like, obviously. So one of the things I'm wondering about is, when you kind of described the fact that nobody knew how to kind of walk with you in this, were you guys involved in church at this point on top of, being in school? And
Yeah, good question. It's so interesting. Just as I noticed talking about this, and I talk about it all the time, but it's like different parts of my story get me at different times, right? And so I'm just noticing a tenderness right now as I talk through it, and even as each one of my kids turns 5 years old, it brings me back to that. And my youngest is 4; he turns 5 in February, and I'm just like, oh, just looking at him. All I have to do is look at him. Imagine what would happen if mom were not to come back, right? So my dad remarried about 2 years later. So when I was 7, and to my stepmom, and she tried. But what I would say is the contrast between my biological mom, who was, from all accounts, I have very little, if any, memory, but I have like pictures and videos and stories from people. As my biological mom was like an amazing woman, loving, nurturing. She was Miss North Dakota in 1970. You could Google her. She was a beautiful woman. She just loved being a mom, loved my sister and I. My sister was 2 years older, or is 2 years older than me. My stepmom came into the picture about 2 years later, and we'll just say she never had kids of her own. And I say this as respectfully as possible. The loving, nurturing, maternalistic instinct isn't her strong suit. Okay. And so I think that was a void in the rest of like my developmental upbringing. I asked my dad this question before he passed. He passed about 6 years ago. And because we never did therapy or counseling properly, formally in our young years. Said, Dad, what did you do during that time? And essentially, like, the advice he was given and that he followed essentially was just keep your kids and family around the church as much as possible. Okay. Great. So like, we were around church growing up. We had a lot of great people in our lives. And as I look back on it, that was obviously helpful. And I don't know, there was something, I think my dad, as I think back at what he must have been going through grieving, it's like he kind of removed himself from that process of continuing to pour into us from a nurturing standpoint. So I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just kind of processing out loud, but that's what he did. a lot of his friends were like psychologists and therapists and great people.
Yep.
But I think the most important thing probably that may have been a miss, not that he, I'm going to hold him responsible for this, is our
Yeah.
stepmom
Right.
was not the most nurturing, right?
Yep.
So
Well, and I wonder, like, I'm asking about the church because so often I know, having grown up in the church and talked to so many, even pastors' kids, missionary kids, that kind of thing, who have developed a real anger toward church, sometimes still a deep love for God, but an anger for the church. In some case, it's throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I don't like the church, I don't like God either, because, and of course, this isn't true for everybody. I know people who've grown up in the church who have had really good experiences, but I just want to kind of tease this out a little bit for our listeners or viewers, that here you have the church as the body of Christ, who is who would, you would think, would be the first ones, who would be kind of the first responders emotionally to the soul needs of a child who's just lost their mother, to a husband who's lost his wife. But I think, as you said, I think sometimes even when there's ministry there for the dad or the mom who's lost their spouse, so often there's not much for kids at all. It's just assumed that, I guess, if the mom is taken care of or the dad's taken care of in this, that somehow they're going to be okay to take their kids. But to be around the church and to actually have a youth pastor or a youth leader or an older person just sit down and put their arm around you and say, honey, I can't imagine what you must be feeling. I just want you to know, like, we love you. We're glad that you're here, and you can talk to me about any of your pain. I mean, however that could be said. I mean, it grieves me, and I'm sure many people listening, and some probably relate to maybe a similar story in their own way of disappointments and wondering where God was in the midst of it, and what practical answers do the church even have when a child is sitting in the midst of this stuff by themselves and basically learning how to become callous to the pain because that's the only solution they feel like they have.
yeah. Yeah. Well, you've articulated the problem statement beautifully. Obviously, I don't have the answer. You don't have the answer. I don't know that there is a answer, right? What kind of goes through my head is where's the grief share group for 6-year-olds, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
it probably doesn't exist in churches, right? I think, just to kind of spitball on that, I think where quote unquote church people miss a lot, and I'll put myself right in that boat. And just as an aside, like, I don't think I grew up with that like total rejection of God, like properly saying, I don't believe this. Like, I played the game for a while, but then it became real on that D-Day 8 years ago,
Yep.
right? Church people, quote unquote, it's like, oh, let us bring you a meal because you guys just, your mom just died or you just lost your wife. And that's great. Like, I'm sure a lot of people, actually, I know a lot of people like brought us meals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure people would bring us toys and stuff, and that's great, right? But I think what you said that lands with me the most is, who can hold me in this?
Yep.
Like, I just want to be held.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most impactful, like, heart work, trauma work I've done is when the loving, nurturing affection from a mother with maternal instinct can be with me in that pain, right?
Yes.
I did another type of workshop where, well, I don't want to describe that. It might sound too weird, but there's I can't remember the name of the psychologist, but he describes the term feeling felt. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Some of the authors I reference, they use this term feeling felt. And by the way, that doesn't have to involve physical contact at all. But it's empathy essentially, right? But to feel like somebody can feel your pain, feel where you're at, and hold you in that is something that's super important. And when I look at youth ministry broadly, I'd say one of my critiques of it, and again, I don't have the answer, is you have a bunch of people who are largely unequipped to go deal with all the real issues in life, trying to go perform ministry with other people and have no idea how to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not blaming them, but like, who knew how to handle me and my sister during those formative years, right, in youth ministry? Like, I don't know. I'm sure people tried. Not saying that there wasn't good good things that came of that. But again, a flight attendant who was a complete stranger to me was able to get right in there with a very simple, maybe obvious question, as opposed to the typical church answers. Oh yeah, that must have hurt. Oh, that's so painful. Like she actually basically was like, BS, Austin. Like
Right.
she's like, let me pull this callus off for you and let's dive into the pain.
Right. Yeah, I think there's, in what you're describing, and this is part of what I want to get to, is my former pastor used to use the line a lot, and I've said it on the podcast a few times, but he used the line that kindness, sorry, the other way around, clarity is better than kindness. And when he said that, he wasn't saying that kindness wasn't important, but he was saying that so often we are stumbling over ourselves trying to be kind and trying to be nice, and we're not being honest. We're not actually addressing the thing that needs desperately to be addressed. And I think about that in this situation as well. Like what, as you described, this flight attendant, just in the simplest kind of way, to look at you directly and to just ask a pointed question, and also to leave you to consider a pointed question she's asking you. I know that we can feel like, oh my gosh, we need all this education to be able to navigate with children. And yes, I'm so grateful that there are counselors who specialize in counseling children and those kinds of things, and other areas of specialty in counseling and care, soul care for people. But I think sometimes we blow it up to be so much bigger than what it actually is, in terms of how can I, as an average sort of church attender, I mean, your typical church attender, I don't mean average necessarily, but your typical kind of church attender or small group leader in children's ministry or men's or women's ministry, how can I actually have anything to really say, or how can I know how to walk with people? And honestly, the reason our ministry exists, one of the big reasons, is to address what we're even talking about, is we want to help men and women and those over those adult ministry areas, but also over youth ministry areas, into getting settled into this idea that there's so much you can offer someone just by giving them the gift of your presence. And so that, like you talked about, that idea of just longing to be held. And I think that's, so many people can relate to that. But the truth is, like in our prayer times, when we're doing an inner healing program and we're doing some listening prayer together in a group setting, one of the things that we typically do, if the person's okay with it, we always check with them, but for the person kind of sitting in the middle and being prayed for, are you okay with a hand on your shoulder? Because it's one thing to sit in a circle around this person with no touch whatsoever. We're not holding them. We're not practicing holding therapy or those kinds of things. But just that sense that, I don't care how dirty your background is, I don't care what you're wrestling with even today, you feel so much shame, you feel like you're so polluted, but like Jesus was willing to touch the leper to heal him, which was against the law, by the way, as he was willing to do that, I want to identify with you. Like, I know my own shame. I want you to know that I identify with you even in that shame, and that I'm not afraid to just put a hand on your shoulder and be with you as we sit and we're quiet before the Lord in listening prayer. I mean, that experience that I've being the recipient of that has been huge for me, that a guy that never dealt with same-sex attraction, for example, as a leader or an assistant or just even a group member, that in so many, at some point during our inner healing time, usually the whole group is kind of released. If you want to pray for someone, just catch the eye of the leader and see. But many times the person being prayed for will have an experience of breaking down emotionally, and that group just gathers around and just puts a hand on their shoulder, on their arm, and there's something so powerful about, oh my gosh, I'm not so filthy and dirty that no one even wants to touch me. There's so much power in that. It's not rocket science, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have a few comments on that. I did this all-day conference on Saturday with Adam Young and Kathy Lorzell. And as we talked about last week, kind of a lot of the authors that influence my thinking and the work I do comes from Dan Allender at the Allender Center. And out of that is like Jay Stringer, Adam Young, a bunch of those people. Look them up if anybody's interested in that. But Adam Young had a few just nuggets in this. He said, kindness will take you further than skill. And as I look at in my healing journey over the last 8 years, there's probably 4 or 5 instances I can account that were the most impactful things for me. Right. And very few
Yeah.
of them are something that somebody said to me. It's more of the way that they were being with me.
Yes. Yes. So right there again, I just want to highlight that separating this, it comes back to what you said a moment ago, that we kind of stumble over, oh, I can't really say anything, I don't want to go into this person's pain, I don't know how to go into the hospital when someone just lost their child, I don't know how to, again, fill in the blanks, fill in the situation, that I don't know how to be with them in their pain. And so I'm fearful I'm going to say the wrong thing. And the truth is, yeah, that's a great thing. That's kind of a good fear to have. Too many times Christians will just pull out these ridiculous true comments or verses or whatever, but aren't appropriate to the grief of the moment. Whereas if we would learn to just get quiet and just be with them and give the gift of our presence, give that idea of attunement, to be there for them, there's so little that actually needs to be said. If we could just connect with people from the heart and just be present, that serves a far greater value than all the clever words or true words we can come up with so often. So Austin, I got you off track totally from telling your story. Pick up a little bit from kind of where you left off, and either direction, before or after, but you were talking a little bit about, obviously within the context of your marriage, and then going through this experience where you came to faith, genuine faith, really for the first time, which I get that too, growing up in a Christian environment and not coming to genuine faith until 23, surrendering my life for the first time. And I think I was totally spiritually dead. I was a religious kid that knew a lot of things about Christianity, but was spiritually dead. Where does your life kind of continue from there? If you need to back up to fill in some gaps, go ahead and do that.
Yeah. I'll back up just a little bit, back to the boy who found pornography, felt so good. This helped soothe some pain in my life. Used that during my teenage years. Had a terrible time with women. Terrible meaning like I had zero confidence. The prospect of even pursuing a girl or a woman, and I'm talking like high school dances and all that. It just wasn't on my radar because I was so cut off to that. And I'm going to breeze over this next part, which is obviously significant, but I was sexually abused and groomed by an older woman when I was 17 years old. And so that just shaped, okay, now my first sexual experience was with an older woman who that gets all kind of twisted in that experience. The pornography was rampant during that time. And then I've got this sexual experience in my head that's like for a 17-year-old boy, like a 10 out of 10. My body wanted that, but it just piled all the shame and guilt on, because it's like, oh, I'm a good Christian boy. Like I shouldn't want this. And the self-contempt that I held over that, which I didn't even name as abuse until a few years ago, right? But now looking back on it, 100% that was sexual abuse. And then kind of in my college years, I never had that super promiscuous phase that, a lot of people talk about. I mean, sure, I had my, my experiences, but I was relatively inward in how I acted out sexuality in my public life. But in my secret life with pornography, it was like anything goes. And so then I meet my wife, or my girlfriend at the time. We essentially went from dating to married in about 7 months. So that happened very quickly. Technically, we knew each other years prior, but we had no relationship. So when we reconnected, we went from dating to married in about 7 months. Get married. I have all these expectations for sex and what marriage is going to be like based on pornography. Yep. She has a very different experience growing up in a pretty religiously rigid household, and that wasn't a good match for us in marriage, right? So then, again, the physical acting out happened, and then that actual heart transformation that happened when D-Day happened. Okay, so now we're back during that workshop, I decided I was going to tell somebody what happened in my life. In the moment, and you can either say that this is the pure naivety and lack of wisdom, or a childlike posture. The consequence of what would happen telling my wife this secret was not on my radar when I confessed to her. It's like, it didn't matter. And I don't mean it didn't matter in that I was careless with it. The bigger consequence was my life was at stake. Okay. Yes, obviously the infidelity, the pornography in my marriage, the betrayal, the cheating, It's all terrible. I am forever indebted to my wife for even attempting to have rebuilt our marriage to the point where it is now. That's obviously big B betrayal and super painful what that caused for us.
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger story here is my life was at stake. I couldn't live my life for anybody, for my wife, for my kids, for my parents, for anybody, because all I cared about was myself. And again, that humility to say, I have got this wrong. There's got to be a solution to this problem that I had been searching for. And it was right in front of me the whole time in church. But finally, the relationship with Jesus was the component that was like, oh, okay, Austin, you don't have to have this all figured out. I got you. I want to hold you in your pain, in your story, so that you can go live your life and be there, be a good husband, be a good father, be a good son. Right. And so that has been the journey for the last 8 years. There's still so much I haven't figured out that I'm having to unlearn and relearn. Right. But it's that humble posture, I think, that is required in transformation to say,
Yeah.
okay, there's something bigger than me here that's driving this story. And all my sins matter. Yes, obviously. And God just wants us to turn towards him, to pursue him. And we can't perfect it. We can't figure it out, I don't believe. But if we're looking to what he says for us, what his plan is for us, then we can actually live in more of an Eden experience, right? Have more flourishing in our relationships around us.
Well, and at the end of the day, I think that's so much of what Christ did for us. Yes, he saved us to take us to be with him for all eternity, but that eternity actually begins now. Yes, there's a doorway of death that we step through, but the great wonder of salvation is that his power, the power that raised him from the dead, also breaks the power of sin in our own lives. It has the capacity to do that. It allows us, just what you were saying a moment ago, Austin, allows us to begin to tap back into his original design for us in Genesis of being a man and a woman, a man or a woman made in his image. And how do we image him? How do we live that out in our particular unique, of equal value, but unique sexuality as a man, as a woman? And of course, we're not going to live that out in a way that's perfect, as you said, but we can go back and begin to get to unpack all of that in a way that informs the way we're living now. It informs the value of our life. It informs the joy of our life. It gives us purpose. That idea you talked about being held, that idea of belonging, that idea of having a place to just be able to rest, to be fully known and fully loved. That really is so much of what the church is meant to be. And yet the church in some ways has sort of shielded itself because of all the image management going on, because of all the posturing that happens there. We're one of the I think one of the least likely places, unfortunately, to live in that posture of being fully known and fully loved. We don't let anybody fully know us typically. Now, I think there are some churches that are unique in this. And again, this is one of the reasons we exist, to work with and equip churches on moving more and more toward this place of being tenacious about holding on to truth and being anchored in the truth of God's word and not minimizing that in any way, shape, or form. What he calls sin, we need to call sin, but we need to start with us, right? We need to start with ourselves, but also to live in that truth in such a way that we are exuding love, that there's lavish love, lavish community that is lived out there. And most of my experience, I love the church. The church is the bride of Christ. There is no plan B. And I want to be a part of strengthening and blessing the church, like I believe you do too. But honestly, we have all this stuff within the body of Christ for transforming the world and transforming lives, but it has to begin with authenticity, right? It's got to begin with the real stuff. We can't build anything that's deep and real and meaningful on a house of cards. I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
I have a ton of thoughts on that. Authenticity in the church. And again, when I'm saying these things, it's not to like throw the baby out with the bathwater or to presume that I have it figured out. Okay. Mm-hmm. The church should be a place where broken people can be. But the mask that people put on, that we put on, I still put this on. One of my coaches over the years, she said, because I was talking about that, and she's like, well, do you have your kids dress up nice for church? I'm like, yeah, of course. We're playing the game, right? Why do we do that? Who are we dressing for? Is it truly out of reverence to God? Or is it because that's the way that we think we need to show up at church on Sunday because that's what everybody else is expecting of us, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just something to notice, right? One thing, again, an Adam Young thing, and then I'll jump back into like, how do we build that authenticity? But Adam Young has this, he calls it the big six. The way he teaches it here is in the context of parenting, but the big six things that are required in order to parent your kids well, but it goes for any relationship essentially. And one of them, and he kind of says this as the most important is the willingness to repair, not if, but when harm has been done. All parents cause harm. If there's a relationship that is worth anything, there will have been harm done, right? And, there's a quote I love that a relationship actually starts at the point of meaningful conflict. Because at that point, you either realize this was an arrangement of convenience or a real relationship that can withstand whatever the thing was that you were dealing with.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's one of the things that's missing a lot in church is that willingness to repair. And sometimes there might not even be an opportunity to repair because we're not going deep enough to even figure out where the cracks are. Okay.
Right.
Now, creating authenticity and intimacy in the church. I mean, people only be as vulnerable as at least one person is willing to be. Okay. I know you live in that space, right? The conferences that you do. I mean, you and your wife stand up there and you're just like a vulnerability masterclass for 30 minutes or whatever, right? As you kind of set the ground for that work, which is almost always, I would probably say always an invitation for other people to then come behind you and be like, okay, well now I want to share something or confess something or acknowledge that I need help in a certain area. The way that the Western evangelical church goes, and again, I want to just keep grounding this, and I'm not criticizing or condemning. No, I'm not condemning it, but I am criticizing it with the intention of like, how can we do better here? It becomes about the light show, the quality of the worship set, right? The one-liners in the sermon, how good the coffee is, and none of those are bad things, but they don't tend to lend itself to moments of intimacy and vulnerability.
Right.
One of the ways that I serve now in the local church, I do my online ministry, we could call it. And then, I still lead Conquer Series groups, which is a faith-based small group tool for porn and sex addiction. I typically do those twice a year. And every time I do it, it's usually a group of new guys that I've never met, or maybe we're acquaintances at best. And by the end of that 12 weeks or 10 weeks, whatever it is, it's like, everybody's like, why do I even go to church on Sunday, the Sunday morning service? Because what we experienced here is actual intimacy, vulnerability, being for one another, and letting the gospel permeate our hearts. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's a replacement for the Sunday morning service, but the question is, why can that be so easily? I don't say that as though like, look at what a great tool that is, or how I am as a facilitator. But why is that not being created in the rest of the church experience? Right. And so that's where my passion lies, kind of like you're saying, is helping be a contribution towards creating that outside of the formal corporate worship settings. So, I mean, that's what I'm up to in life, right? And part of how I do that on my TikTok and my content, which we can talk more about, is just bringing people.
I want to talk more about that too.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with everything you said, except your criticism of coffee. I think they need to have really good coffee, actually, on Sunday mornings.
They do. That can be a big turnoff.
But besides that, that idea, though, of it's important what you're talking about, and it's also important that I hear that same thing a lot. Like, why I've experienced more intimacy and more depth here in 6 weeks, or a dozen weeks of being together that I've experienced in 5, 6, 10 years of church. And what I'm always reminding people of is, just what you said, this is not a substitution for church. This is a jump start to the battery of your own heart. So you get to experience something that you now get to take. Let this be contagious in your life, that you take it back into your own church setting, and that you are engaging with people and inviting people into this deeper life. Now, if somebody is hitting nothing but roadblocks, I mean, I've gone to some churches where they finally flat out said, which I was so grateful. I mean, it was hard to hear in the moment, but looking back, I was grateful for, and I'm very grateful even in the moment now when a church says, look, we just don't want We don't want you. You need too much. We don't want that kind of depth here. And honestly, the truth is, oh, you just saved me a ton of time. I mean, I'm glad to know that, because I'm not going to stay here because that's not what you're after. But I am going to look for the church that is interested in the contributions that I can bring to it. And also, I need to be fed and poured into as well, obviously. And I have a ton to still learn, but I want to find a community that is looking for the gifts of the Spirit, the discernment and encouragement and exhortation, as well, obviously, as preaching and teaching and the common things we often hear in church, which are essential, but so are the rest of the gifts of the Spirit in our lives, right? So definitely, if you're hitting a roadblock in a church, I don't think people should just leave their churches because they're like, well, they're not really doing much. Well, what are you doing to try to help that church grow and become better? Go into groups like you're doing, Austin. Go into some of the places that I'm involved with. Go to where Desert Stream Ministries is running Living Waters. Get some of the healing that you need there, some of the experience and training you need there, and take that back into your own church experience. But if there's nothing but brick walls and roadblocks, then you may very well be in the wrong place. Have honest conversations with your pastor and leadership to find out if they really want this contribution. Do they want honest conversation around men's sexuality, around women's sexuality, and the struggles that people have going on in their lives in those regards? If they don't, then you're probably in the wrong place. And there are plenty of churches that are languishing. So is that other church that you were just at, but they don't realize it yet. But there's plenty of churches that are languishing because so many people are wrestling in this area of their sexuality, of their identity, and of their broken relationships. And it's all leaking out in their marriages and their relationships with their kids, etc. But we've got to get down to some of the core issues. And that's where I want to align myself with, the old Blackaby saying from Experiencing God material: find where God is working and join him there. Yeah.
Beautiful. Are you familiar with Nisa Powers? You have to be. The
name sounds familiar, but not overly so. The name is familiar.
So I won't spend a lot of time on that, but you got to look him up.
Yeah.
So he was an influencer who transitioned to female, did all
yes. I've actually reached out to Nisa.
Okay, yeah. Oh yeah, you got to be connected. What comes to mind, he did a podcast interview with Ryan Miller, who's like a young, I don't know if he's a pastor, but he's I think it's Dude with Good News is his TikTok. They did a podcast and she was all doubting herself. Who am I to be used by God? And why me? I was 3 weeks ago, I was a woman. Now I'm a man and I couldn't even,
So you just use the female pronouns for a moment. So it gets confusing, right? So this is a guy. Nisa is a guy.
It's a biological male who did transition to female and then transition back to male. Yeah.
Yes.
Point of that is Ryan Miller was don't overthink it. You're doing it. You have probably impacted more people for the gospel in the last 2 months than most people will in their lifetime. And a friend of mine just shared it in his sermon on Sunday. God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. So if we're just willing to, as opposed to what so many people do, and I've been guilty of this as well, is I can't believe this church is doing this thing wrong and they're not getting vulnerable enough or whatever. It's what am I doing to go help with that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. So, okay, do I want other people to go behave in the way that I'm wanting everybody to behave, or do I want to just be a contribution towards that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I think there's the part of why I have chosen that question is porn cheating in my content, which I'll unpack here in a second, is I haven't found a better pathway into getting into the inner workings of what's going on into somebody's life than sex, or pornography issues, which can dive into it. And that's why I'll just plug Jay Stringer's book. I know you're familiar.
Yeah, Unwanted, yeah.
The tagline of this book is How Sexual Brokenness Reveals Our Way to Healing. It is not, here's how you recover from pornography as a man, or here's how as a woman you discover your sexual identity. No, it's your sexual story or brokenness, which everybody has to some extent. Just think puberty. What's wrong with me, right?
Yep.
Everybody has something, and it's a path towards healing our brokenness. And it's just such a beautiful invitation to, okay, well, what's going on inside your heart, right?
Yep.
So the is porn cheating question, I started using that about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, mainly on TikTok, where I'll go live on TikTok. I put this question above my head. It says, is porn cheating? Which is kind of vague in a sense, but it's intended to be a conversation starter. And it is fascinating where people will go with that question.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have the position, the way that I outline the argument to be logically consistent, or essentially where pornography is only cheating if you decide it's cheating in the context of your monogamous relationship. Okay. Now, you could probably poke holes in that theologically, right? I get it. It's a sin against your own body. It's not good for yourself. I got that. I'm for the sake of creating this conversation, is porn cheating? If you're in a committed monogamous relationship with another person and you've said something like, I love you, only you, mind, body, and soul till death do us part. If you go against that agreement, whether it's using a person on a screen or otherwise, you violated the agreement and you're therefore cheating. That's kind of how I present this argument. So if somebody wants to come on and say, well, me and my wife or me and my husband decide that we use pornography, I won't argue with them to try to get them to agree that it's cheating or not. Oftentimes, I'll point it back to, is there a faith component here? And then we'll go straight to Matthew 5:27 and 28. You might have heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say to you, if you even look at a woman with lustful intent, you've committed adultery with her in your heart.
Yep.
And that just exposes the heart posture behind cheating or fidelity, right? It's not the action that we take, it's where is our heart in it. And Jesus wants our heart. God wants our heart to be aligned with him. So that's why the thought life does matter, as opposed to just what we do with our genitals.
Yes. Well, I also want you to unpack more of what you're doing on TikTok and kind of how that began as well. I'd love to hear some of that story. I'm sure our listeners and viewers would love to hear that. But I'm also, one of the things I love about what you're doing, Austin, is that you're asking great questions. So you've got the primary question that's up there, right? But so much of what you're not being, to the best of my understanding, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but to the best of my understanding, you're not even really trying to be directive. You're trying to through questions, you're trying to stir up what oftentimes, again, we're made male and female in the image of God. John Eldredge talks about this idea that we hear a lot about original sin, but we hear almost nothing about original glory. Like even unbelievers have a sense of rightness and wrongness within them that may be completely marred. It may be callous in so many different ways. And yet, because the image of God is in them as male and female, nearly everyone, unless they're a genuine psychopath, has some level of compassion, has some level of conscience about rightness and wrongness that God has planted within them. And it's one of the reasons I think your work, your ministry is so effective, even in the non-believing space, because you're just asking questions that stir up something. Ultimately, these ridiculous arguments of justifications for all kinds of different sins, whether that's taking the life of the unborn or all these things, they wind up falling in on themselves if you can just ask the questions and have the questions be something that somebody engages with. And even as someone's verbalizing something in defense of what they believe, when it's coming out of their mouth and not just in their head, I think even to them it sounds so ridiculous. Like, wait a minute, I feel like I'm actually speaking against what I said I believed by just trying to put some form and shape to this. So talk about the kind of the beginning of how you got into TikTok in the first place, how you started this, and then the incredible value and of questions, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. And are we okay on time? I'm good on time.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
We're good.
Cool. All right. So I want to make one point. I can't not make this point, and this goes back to Jay Stringer's work in Unwanted. Again, one of the most impactful things that I did in my therapeutic journey, and this was with a coach, just talking about sex and having all that shame over why I shouldn't be doing or wanting all of the sex things or desires that I have. And she flipped it on its head, essentially like, Austin, sex is really good. Part of you is designed to have great sex. Can you bless that? And that invitation just completely turns the shame on its head. Mm-hmm. And now, obviously, there's shameful things and there's perverse things we can do with our sexuality. I'm not saying that there isn't.
But God's the author of. Yeah,
exactly. But to come back to that original blessing is like, Oh yeah, that's sexual wholeness. I think that can kind of sum it up. Is like we can be
Yeah.
with one another in what God has designed, naked and unafraid to do so. Right.
Mhm.
So I just want to kind of make that point with how we all have that story.
Yes.
All right. So the is porn cheating? Can you succinctly ask your question again on the second part?
Sure. I'd love to know, like, where did it first enter your mind? I
Okay.
mean, I was
Okay.
nervous enough to even sit down and start my first podcast. When did it
Yeah.
even enter your mind to do a live TikTok?
Yeah. All right. Well, so so I started doing all of this. Gosh, and it's again the power of a non-believer, right, or somebody who I
Mm.
don't think is a believer. I ran into a friend of mine, a homosexual guy who I knew in college. Okay, and this is 15 years later. And I ran into him at my office. He had an apartment near where I officed at, and said, "Hey, man, what's up?" And kind of, catch me up on what's going on in your life. And he's like, "Well, I'm gay." I'm like, "We all knew that. But I don't think you knew that in college, but we all did." And he shared his story of coming out. I'm like, "Okay, great. Glad to hear that. Glad to see where you're at." He's like, Where are you at in life?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I blew up my marriage. I was cheating on my wife. I was addicted to porn, putting it back together." And he's like, "Wow, yeah, as looking back on it, you kind of were an a-hole in college. And I'm glad you finally figured that out and you're working on it." So we had this beautiful interaction, right? An unlikely interaction. And he happened to be the host of an online mental health channel called Med Circle. He still is. His name's Kyle. You can look him up. And he's like, "Fascinating. Could I interview you, or could we interview you about pornography addiction?" And I was like, "Oh, shoot." I'd never spoken like publicly about it.
Yeah.
I've spoken to churches in front of hundreds of people, but now it's like, oh, I'm going to be interviewed, and this is going to go out to the world, but a channel with 1.5 million subscribers. I'm like, you know what? I cannot pass up this opportunity to share my
Right.
story and share the gospel in the process, right? So I did that. And then I actually coincidentally went to Vegas like right before that interview launched for the Consumer Electronics Show, which is like a nerd convention in Vegas, first week of January. And I brought a microphone with me and a friend of mine who does video. And I'm like, I'm going to go talk to people on the strip and just ask the question, is porn cheating? Or what do you think about porn? And standing in front of the Bellagio, I asked maybe 3 or 4 people and got a couple clips that were decent. But what I realized is everybody has an opinion on this.
Mhm.
And there's always the people that just put their tail between their legs in shame and like can't even have the conversation. Fine, no problem. It's talking about porn publicly isn't for everybody. But what I realized is, oh my gosh, there's absolutely a desire to bring this topic to the light. And so I obviously try to bring a healing nature to that. But that's when I realized, oh man, I can do this. Like I've had 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years of healing in my journey. I'm going to go create some public conversation around this. And so I started creating content on TikTok. And on TikTok, once you get a certain amount of followers, you can go live and host live conversations. And for the first probably 6 months or a year, it was just me literally sitting with my phone on the couch. I'd have 8 or 10 or maybe 12 people in my live hanging out, and
Yeah.
probably 80% women, 20% men. The women are devastated from the betrayal. The men have shame over the addictive nature of it. And what came from that was I launched my coaching groups. I have groups both for women who are going through betrayal and men who are going through unwanted sexual behavior. And I kind of turned these little, small, intimate lives into a offline paid, well, Zoom based, but not live, paid experience where I facilitate people through this. But then at one point, this was early in 2024, my lives kind of just blew up, my TikTok lives. And really, I think it's because I started just putting that question up there, is porn cheating?
Mhm.
And so I'd have lives where I'd have 500, 600, 700 people watching me concurrently for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. And on TikTok, you can bring up a guest either one at a time, or you can have a panel of up to 9 people total. But I typically just bring on one person at a time. I have this question above my head that says, is porn cheating? And I'll bring up a guest, and I can't see their face. So typically, most people opt not to have their camera on. Very few do turn it on. But typically all I get is their username and their voice,
Yep.
which is, I think it's also just beautiful because sometimes people accuse me of only bringing on a certain type of person with a certain opinion or a certain background. I'm like, guys, I hit a button that says accept. I have no idea what I'm going to get.
Right.
And so I'll just ask the person the question, hey there, is porn cheating? And I kind of like, I don't reveal my opinion right out of the gate necessarily, though if you watch the live, you'll know where I come from. But people have all sorts of thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm.
People will yell at me for being the sole problem for everything going on in the world because I'm making somewhat of a claim that there's a problem with pornography.
Yep.
I'll have guys who will be like, I've never talked about this before. And I've never told anybody that I'm struggling with pornography. I'll have women who, I mean, this has happened multiple times, women who will say, I just found out today my husband has been seeing prostitutes or, watching all sorts of perverse type of pornography. I'm devastated. I don't know what to do. I've been married 15 years. I got 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get, 21-year-old girls who are OnlyFans creators, so proud of their OnlyFans content and how it's given them all this power and liberation. And some OnlyFans creators, they've stopped creating OnlyFans content because of talking to me or being in this community. Others are, again, trying to have tirades against me, saying that I'm trying to kill their business. But really what this live platform has created is just conversation around this topic that very few people want to talk about. And like you said, I tried to the best of my ability, the Holy Spirit working through me, to maintain a neutral point of view and just ask questions, Socratically ask people questions. And like you said too, I have had so many times people will come on and talk to me. And sometimes I reframe pornography and masturbation. I'll say, okay, got it. So like how many times a week or a month do you masturbate while watching strangers have sex? I'll reframe it like that. And they'll be like, well, when you say it like that, it sounds kind of gross. I'm like, well, that's what it is though. You're masturbating while watching strangers have sex. And then like everything changes in them. Like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then over a lot of conversation, like people just see this topic differently. So, yeah.
Wow. Again, I love the way that God is using you as an entry point into this very, very important topic and in this important space, and to bring a Christian perspective that's not coming down like a sledgehammer at all, but is definitely getting into places it would not get into if it was being used as a sledgehammer or not being said at all. Obviously, one thing I just want to back up to a little bit, and you and I could have could come from very different places on this and may disagree on it, but but for the sake of our audience and just our reasoning and thoughts around sexuality and LGBT issues as a ministry and as a podcast, I just want to back up to the conversation you had with your friend from college. And again, I see that as being a welcoming conversation, not pulling out Romans 1 or 1 Corinthians 6 the moment he says that he's gay. But from our perspective, LGBT is not, it's been billed as, and it's promoted as, and it's popularly understood as an identity issue, but it's actually a sin issue that is not something that is immutable. Or, when I say immutable, what I'm saying is it isn't something that needs to control our lives and prevent us from being obedient to Jesus. It may be something that on some level, for me, my audience knows I still deal with some levels of same-sex attraction, but it's a small thing compared to what it once was, where it totally consumed my life. So we're very careful about saying that over and over again, Melissa and myself, because we never want people to think that, pray the gay away is something that we promote, or that somehow you cast out the demon at the altar and it's all done. But instead, it's really the same thing that God invites everybody to and requires. Doesn't just invite, he does invite, but it's a requirement that we are to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow after him if we want to be his disciple. And so just the language around, we always knew you were gay. And that this is the same language I would have used at one time too. But what I think a more accurate way of saying that, and again, you can feel free to push back, I just wanted to put this out here, is that something to the effect of, well, we always knew that was something that you wrestled with or something that you struggled with. Not again that your friend would have received that language at that point, but it's not like, oh, you've always been this and now you finally discovered who you are and you're living your true, authentic self. No, you're living out something that feels true to you in your flesh, but Jesus has called us to something else. By the way, not just out of the LGBT world, but also out of heterosexual brokenness, which you're addressing and talking to all the time. Is there anything in that you want to either push back on or say something to?
I mean, I agree. I agree with everything you're saying, and I would very much so defer to how you present these issues. 'Cause this is obviously your wheelhouse. And maybe just to clarify one thing, my intention is not to highlight this person's claimed sexual orientation. It was
Right.
more to say, here are two people that were in relationship with each other 15 years
Yes.
ago, and we both ran into each other on the street, essentially with some sort of new awareness of how we are walking in
Yes.
life, right?
Right.
And so him being like, oh, I'm gay now, me being like, oh, I'm the sexual deviant who has had all this, blew up my marriage and all that, and without affirming nor disaffirming or
Yep.
de-avowing each other's behaviors, it was, well, cool, let's hang out and catch up, right?
Yep. Yep.
And there's that phrase, connect before you correct, right?
Mhm.
And not to say that I'm the person who should have corrected him in that moment or vice versa, but it's just like, no, how can we be in relationship first?
Yep.
And again, when I look at my story, how I may have held the LGBTQ issue in the past versus now, look at the unlikely heroes in my transformation story. I'm not saying I'm anything to be modeled after, right? A flight attendant and an old friend from college who had just come out as gay.
Mhm.
Where he was the launching pad for me creating content on TikTok.
Yep.
And I think there's so much nuance in how we can hold, how we be with each other in people's stories. I'm forever grateful to him for that.
Right.
Because he had the courage to platform me.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Now, what a lot of people may want to do, or what I may have wanted to do in a moment like that, is think to my head, how can I make this person not be gay? Because that would be the right Christian response to a gay person. I'm like, what is that going to do?
Right.
I tell you for sure what it's going to do, probably, is alienate somebody who just wants some connection in life.
Right. Yes.
And,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so again, just so we're on the same page on this, I'm sure. But I loved the interaction you described. I just wanted to clarify for our audience in terms of again, what our perspective, for somebody maybe new coming into this or whatever, what our perspective is, on these issues. I know what it feels like to believe that was my identity wholeheartedly, 100%, right? And to think that anybody would be an idiot to say what I just said, which is no, at a core, this isn't about identity. It's about a sin issue that's been recast within and repeated so many times that it feels like it's cultural truth, but it actually isn't. Well, maybe cultural truth, but it's not biblical truth. So it may be culturally popular, but that doesn't make it true. So anyway, I love though the idea of meeting people where they're at, regardless. People coming into our church, coming in as a gay couple or whatever. The first thing they don't need to be hearing all the corrective language. They need to experience what it is to be in a community that loves on each other well. But eventually, love is not does not gloss over or ignore sin. But it doesn't mean that the moment somebody walks into your life, or you're just trying to gain some trust or build some kind of sort of healthy attachment, that there's no faster way to blow that up than to drop a truth bomb before you even can greet them practically. So
Yeah.
I loved the interaction you had, and I also love the fact that God uses these dynamics and circumstances to be like, leaves you kind of scratching your head. But here's this person that kind of launched you in this ministry, which is pretty darn amazing. I love all that. So is there anything in terms of how can people find you, Austin? And two things, how can people find you? Anything you want to share along that line? And then whether that's website, TikTok, social media, or email. And then secondarily, is there anything that you've kind of wanted to say or you feel kind of prompted to say that we've not yet discussed that you'd want to leave with our audience?
Yeah, a couple things. Maybe to kind of land that point that you're describing in a different way. Cliff Connectel, who's like an online evangelist, you may have seen him on YouTube. He kind of talks about monogamy and non-monogamy in that way. He's like, I may have the desire to go sleep with multiple partners or multiple women, but my flesh may want that, but I'm not going to. I'm married to one woman, and this is who I'm going to be in my relationship with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that desire may not come up, right? One of the sayings I say a lot, with wandering eyes, people are like, oh, you just need to like stare at the floor. Well, that's not helpful. because you have to see other people in real life.
Right.
You can't help the first look, but you can help the second look.
Right.
So you can't help that you might see a beautiful man or woman out in public, but you can help what you do with that. Like you were describing, you may have, some sort of same-sex attraction in you somewhere. Okay, but what do you do with that? Right? What are you going to do with that? So I think that's just where this humility, what evangelicalism tries to do is make these fringe issues the main issue, and everybody has to agree 100% about what to do with these issues. And most of the time it doesn't affect people's lives in practice. But two, it's like we're missing the heart of these issues deep down. All right. So my social media handles, my main one is Porn Coach, Pxrn Coach, Pxrn, because if you say PORN, it can get censored and filtered out. So Pxrn Coach. I'm on all the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. TikTok is my main platform, mainly because of my live content. So I have 42,000 or some followers on there. All of my live episodes are simulcasted on YouTube. So YouTube, they might have like 3 views on YouTube, but there was probably 10,000 people watching it on TikTok. So not that the view count matters. I just want to give that. If you go and you're like, oh, this guy has no views, it's because people are watching it on TikTok. YouTube just becomes like my repository for it. So Pxrn Coach on all the platforms. I also have groups, like I said, both for men dealing with unwanted sexual behavior, for women dealing with partner betrayal trauma. I do one-on-one coaching as well as group coaching. You can go to my website, Pxrn Coach, for information on that. The groups are paid groups. I always want to say this. There's groups that are paid. There's groups that are free. My heart here is not to get people to sign up and watch my content or to come join one of my groups. It's if you feel like there's something missing in your life, some sort of behavior you're dealing with and you want help, go get help and find the trusted guide, as we call it, who's going to be a helpful resource for you in that. That's me. If that's Gary, somebody on Gary's team, your pastor, your partner to be a pathway for that, have the courage to go open up that can of worms, which, by the way, it's going to get more painful before it gets less painful, because that's typically how this works. Go get help. And it's not help because you have you're a problem to be fixed. It's because God has a beautiful plan for your life. And there's only one person on this planet who can execute the plan that God has for you. And that's you.
Yes.
Right? Somehow in my life, I'm the porn guy now on the internet. Okay, you couldn't have given me enough money in my early 20s to say this is where you're going to be when you're 40 years old. But here we are, right? Yep. And it's been the best journey of my life so far. So, really in the meta narrative there is, what does the gospel mean to you? Well, what does the gospel mean, period? And then how are you going to apply that to your life? I think the 3 most important questions a person can ask themselves is, who is God, who am I, and why does that matter?
Yep.
And what will we do? A lot of people sit in the pews just like I did and still do. I haven't figured this out completely, right? But I think I'm pointing maybe in the right direction now. But what am I going to do with that information? That there is a God, he matters, he loves me, and he wants something beautiful for me in my life. And that is found by serving other people. And by the way, I also would be remiss in saying, truly with humility, when I'm on TikTok with people in these uncovered spaces with them, I miss a lot. Okay, I just want to say it. I miss a lot. It's risky to go out there and to try to stir up these conversations. And what I try to do is to have that willingness to repair, not if, but when I miss with somebody, right?
Yep.
And so whatever fear might be keeping anybody listening to this, which I deal with on an almost daily basis as well, are you willing to go risk for the sake of love with those around you? To risk practicing kindness for the sake of love for those around you? Sometimes the kindest thing is not the nicest thing.
Right.
Right? Is it
kind?
Exactly. Is it kind to go help somebody realize, hey, you're watching porn, for 15 hours a week? This might be a problem. Do you want to look at that? Yeah, I think that's a really kind thing to do. They might not like it, but I think it's really kind. So anyways, we could go on forever, but
that's good. Austin, thanks. I appreciate you coming on the program and sharing your heart and your thoughts, and just also giving out your information where people can connect with you. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Love and Truth Network podcast. Go and check out Austin. Check out his material. I think you'll really be blessed by it and encouraged by it. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for joining us for the Love and Truth Network podcast. We hope that the stories and insights shared have ignited in you a sense of God's powerful love for you and given you encouragement for your own journey toward relational and sexual wholeness. Remember, transformation is absolutely possible when rooted in grace, truth, and authentic biblical community. Subscribe today, share with a friend, share with your pastor, and we look forward to seeing you in our next Love and Truth Network podcast.